Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. As you can see in our description, we have a guest today. Um, and Daniel, we love to start our guests off on our podcasts by asking you how your week's been. And I know it's Tuesday, but tell us about your last week. How's it been?
Oh, look, actually pretty good. It's always a bit of a mixture, a bit of travel, a bit of client work, some fun in there. I actually got to play golf last week, which was always fun,
Nice.
and traveled interstate. Usually working with all sorts of different people. I'm currently working with a real variety of different clients, from really blue collar, council workers right through to corporates, and having that diversity always makes my week a bit more fun.
Nice. I love that. That's like my week as well. I love that diversity. So, Daniel, and I should say your full name too to introduce you, Daniel Murray. Welcome to our podcast. Now, we'll talk about your book shortly because you've got a book coming out. But first of all, let's share a little bit about your journey to how you've got to here.
Look, it's a bit of a winding tale. So I actually did a degree in mathematics at university, which isn't
Impressive.
very exciting, and I don't always tell people. But the main reason I did that was that I didn't love reading, and maths was something that was very logical and rational, and I can sort of understand it. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. I ended up falling into to banking and insurance and those sorts of areas, and was working in a sort of consulting capacity. And one thing I always found was we'd build these beautiful big plans and schedules and projects, and the PowerPoint looked beautiful, and we had lots of chevrons and graphs. The thing was that we'd then try and implement, and they wouldn't work. They'd fail. And I remember a conversation I had with a colleague, and I said, "Why do these things keep failing?" And he said, "Oh, it's because the clients aren't very good at implementing." And I thought, well, okay, that's nice, but it's probably not true. What could be going on? And there was a moment that really struck me, that I was working with a project manager, Danette, and if you've worked in projects, you'll know this. He had a beautiful Gantt chart and lovely, everything was put together in a very fancy way, and there was a resource map there. And at the top of this column said FTE, and a whole list of names beside it. And I was looking at this chart, this resource chart, and of course this was the people allocated to this project. And I said to the guy who built it, "Hey Joel, what if they don't want to do the work?" And he said, "What do you
I
mean?"
love that.
I said, "Well, look, you've got this guy here, Barry. I've worked with Barry. Barry's a good guy. You've got him as a 1 on this project, fully allocated. I can tell you that some days Barry's a 1. Some days more like a 0.2. Other days he's a 1.3. Like, just from a maths perspective, that's a huge amount of variability. How do you manage it?" And his answer was, "Well, we just ignore it." And this for me was sort of a turning point, that people are the dynamic, crazy, complex wild cards. And as a mathematician, I had no idea how to approach this, how to do it, how to understand people. And so that sort of started me on this path of, well, how can I help people like me understand people better, which is a big part of the empathy gap, and why we need to close it.
Oh, I love that. What a great story. And I actually knew a Barry like that as well. Interesting. So let's talk now about your book, The Empathy Gap, and particularly why you decided to write the book now.
Oh, look, it's been a long piece of work in progress. So I would say the last 10 odd years of my career have been dominated by this idea of how do we understand what empathy is and what the challenges are, and how do we demystify it a little bit. And so really for me, this was about putting together this research, the work that I've done, the models, the tools, the frameworks, into something that's really useful for leaders to use. And I think now's a really critical time. I don't think there hasn't been a critical time, but I think now's even more important, because we're on the sort of precipice of AI taking over a lot of the tasks and activities, and even decisions and ideas. But what I can't do yet is really connect with the machine and understand the machine, and it understand me, and it feel like we have a sense of trust. And so this is really why this is such a critical thing for leaders to be taking on now. How do we understand people more?
I love that. I love that. So then I'm pretty sure we're going to have some viewers that have and listeners who have maybe slightly different definitions of empathy. So I thought we'd start with actually, what's your definition of empathy?
Yeah, look, there are lots. If you talk to psychiatrists, psychologists, there's a whole bunch of different, affective and semantic and a whole bunch of different ways you can define it. The way I like to approach it is from a highly practical perspective. And to probably frame this, Danette, my view is I want to create really usable, practical tools for people to deploy this in their lives rather than to study it academically. So my academic friends, I love all your definitions. They're wonderful, but that's not what I'm trying to do. My definition is very simple. Empathy is understanding why people do what they do.
Nice.
What drives them, what motivates them, what causes them to do the things that they do. And trying to understand that is both really challenging at times. We tend to make assumptions. We tend to think, why would I do that?
Yes.
Or we tend to make up a story that person's actions and behaviors fit into nicely and think that the story must therefore be true. And empathy for me is about trying to strip away a lot of that noise and really just focus on the other person.
Nice. And I love that idea that we're really trying to understand them and their perspective. So, because that's what you're sort of trying to get to. So I love that. So then tell us about what is the empathy gap, and then we'll talk about the second part of that question.
Yeah, look, I think the gap is this divide that we've created between us and them. You see this in the media. We're very good at it on social media. I live in a little place called Bribie Island up in Queensland,
Nice.
and our community Facebook page has to be one of the most entertaining places where people just want to pick fights and choose sides and scream at someone as to why they're right and someone else is wrong. And the promise of the internet was we'd have all the information and everyone's got it. But actually what we got was every different possible opinion. And what we feed through that process is I can confirm that I'm right in whatever I believe in by Googling it and finding some evidence. And therefore, I don't want to cross this gap between you and me.
Yeah.
And so empathy is this gap between us where it says, I do have beliefs and views, but I want to put them aside and I just want to close the gap. I want to understand what's going on in your world. Not because I believe it or I'm convinced it's true or I think it's okay, but I just want to understand. And this gap of understanding is something that I think we're using lots of technology and tools to quickly open, but we need to become much more human to close.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. So then my second part of the question is, why do leaders need to work on this?
Well, it sort of goes back to what we talked about with Barry. As a leader, you've got a bunch of people. You've got some people you're trying to help, to support, to deliver outcomes and serve some people. And to get the best out of Barry, I need to understand what's going on. What are the things that cause him to sometimes be a point two? Not my assumptions, not my preconceived ideas, but what actually is going on for Barry? What are the things that Barry might need to help him to get closer to a one or even above? And so many organizations I work with, they say they're under-resourced, they don't have enough people, they don't have enough money. I can't make for you more people or more money. But what I can be pretty confident of is we're not getting the full productivity out of the people we've got.
Yes.
And bringing more people in, driving them into apathy and through these sort of poor leadership and underwhelming cultures that we tend to have, that's the gap we need to fill. So it's really about leaders being able to understand their people better so they can support them to get the best out of them and help them to thrive and flourish.
And what I love about this particular conversation is that is a skill that AI can't do for us. Like we actually have to have those conversations because AI can make up ideas about why they might be acting as they are, but actually you only ever find out when you have those conversations. So
you're right. And look, it might be a bit of a tangent, but I think the real
okay.
fear.
Let's go there.
Yeah, that's right. I think the real fear with AI isn't that it's going to take over the world and kill us all and take our jobs, but it's that AI can trick some of those systems in our brain, those reward systems and dopamine systems. If you think about the challenges that algorithms already create for people, and the extreme sort of sides and views that it can create in people, we've already seen that.
Yes.
We've experienced that. And so, if you want to get the best out of people, it's not about tricking them. It's not about trapping them. It's not about, coercing them. We need, as humans, to be able to make people feel like they're safe and empowered and connected and feel part of a group again. And I don't think anyone feels like AI is going to be the thing that I'm teamed up with. They're my family. They're my home team. They've got my back. I
Yes.
think it's really about finding that trust in people we need to make sure we're building.
Yep. Oh, I love that. So then, I'm interested in, can you give an example or two, perhaps, because I know one of the things you talked about was questions and how we sort of develop that deeper understanding of our people and build that trust. So can you give me an example or two of a question that we could, would spark that in people?
Yeah, look, I think it's not just the words you say. So we'll talk about. I'll give you some questions, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So, look, a really great question is, so how are you feeling? Now, we ask a question like that quite often. How are you going?
Yes.
The challenge is when we say how are you going, what we mean sometimes, and what many people interpret we mean is I'm saying hello and I don't really care, so don't answer. Don't tell me the real answer because I don't care. I'm just trying to. Right? If you sit next to someone on the bus and say, how's it going? And they start giving you a life story, you want to get off the bus. The thing is, what we want to be able to do with our people sometimes is actually sit and say, look, how are you really feeling? What's really going on? And sometimes adding that little word like really transforms the question, but being receptive, being really close to them, actually leaning in, getting off your phone, not being on the computer. Right? We get on to Zoom and I'm listening as we're typing away and clearly looking at another screen. All of that stuff that we sit around the question actually matters.
Yes.
The other thing in terms of questions is sometimes we say things that sound like they're questions, but they're really not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, why did you do that? That sounds like a question, but it's not really. It's an accusation. Or are you really wearing that? That's not a question. And so, again, questions start with you having genuine curiosity. And I think if we just spend more time demonstrating to people that we're actually curious, because I can give you a nice, beautiful question and you can say it beautifully, but if your intention is you don't really care, you're ticking a box, everybody knows it and it won't work. So I think just questions like, how are you really feeling? What's really driving you? How did it feel in that moment? One of the things I love to do and help leaders to do with their teams is to have conversations where we take a person and say, okay, look, let's talk about your behaviors. Let's talk about the things you did, but we're not talking about you. We're just talking about the behaviors. And let's analyze these as things that we can change, things that could be good or bad, but let's just look at these as separate from you because I really like you. I think you're awesome. And so, again, the way in which you have conversations with people has to demonstrate both I care about you and I'm here to help you improve. So there's things that we have to talk about and behaviors we have to change.
Yep. Yep. I love that. What are some other things that, as leaders, they can do to reduce the empathy gap? Because clearly I've seen it and you've definitely seen it, that there is quite a gap in a lot of organisations. So what are some simple things leaders can start to do with good intention?
Yeah, there's plenty. And look, in the book, I give lots of really practical sort of tools and frameworks you can use. But I'll share a couple that I think are really useful. The first one is as we sort of talked about, ask genuine questions and don't lead the conversation all the time. One of the worst things we do in teams is we go, okay, team, we need to make a decision between A, B, or C. I think it's A. What do you think? We've immediately anchored the conversation.
Yes.
Often the second way that people try and do that is they go, okay, team, we've got to choose between A, B, or C. What do you think? And unfortunately, our extroverts will take over and lead the conversation, which may or may not be a good thing. A better way to do it, and look, if you're going to have a conversation like this and you wanted to really get people's opinions, I would say to them before the meeting, hey, team, we're going to have a meeting this afternoon. I want to get your opinions on this. Can't wait to talk to you at the end of the day. Now, what will happen there is your extroverts will ignore the email and they'll just do it on the fly. And your introverts will thank you because you've given them time to think about it. Now, when you get into the room, I'd say to people, okay, we've got to choose between A, B, or C. What I'd like each of you to do is to write down which of those three you think and 2 or 3 bullet points below it.
Nice.
Now, again, some of your introverts have already got it there ready to go. Extroverts are like, oh, I had no idea. That's all's fine. After they've written them down, just ask each person to go around and just read out what they've written down.
Yeah. Nice.
And you'll find people will say things like, oh, gee, I think I might have got this wrong because I thought something completely different. And at that point, you should say, thank you. Awesome. Let me hear it.
Yep.
So I think creating that space in your teams where people can share ideas and build empathy with each other and better understand each other is really vital. I think the other thing leaders need to do to close the gap is they need to be vulnerable. They need to show that they don't know. They need to be very curious themselves and humble enough to know that they don't have all the answers. And the reason this is so important is we want, I've worked with many leaders who say, oh, I want everyone to be honest and open and vulnerable. And then I'll go, so are you honest and open and vulnerable? And they go, hell no. And so what you're signaling to people is either I'm better than you, I'm different to you, and I expect different things of you, or actually I don't really want it. I just say that I want it because it sounds good.
Yes. Yeah.
Leaders have to lead that dance. We have to be vulnerable and curious ourselves.
Yep. Yep. And I love the practicality of both of those. So thank you for that. So we're always curious with writers about their writing process because we know we have a number of listeners and viewers who also are interested in writing. So tell us a little bit about your writing process, Daniel.
If there are other people who are writing and authors in listening, I suffer with you. It's challenging. As I mentioned, I wasn't very good at reading when I was younger. I struggled with reading for a long time, and even now I consume a lot of books, but almost always audiobooks.
Yes.
And so sitting down and writing sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. The thing I find is when I get excited about a topic, what I try and do is just write as much as I can about that and just dump it into, I use Google Docs, into a Docs file, just put as much as I can in there and sort of store it away. And then in the back of my mind, I'm starting to think about how do we piece these pieces together? How might they fit? The book, The Empathy Gap, this one over here, it really came out of, or I was actually starting to write this, and then ended up writing another book because I kept going on this tangent that didn't make sense and put that out to the world and published that earlier, and then kept working on this in the background. So my process is it's slow, it's bursts of excitement and an interest and research, and then the slow process of sort of filling in the gaps afterwards.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that too. Yeah, not too many authors go, oh yeah, it was a really easy process, and we all have struggled. So I love that share. So we're coming to the end of the podcast, but I'm curious, Daniel, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers?
Oh, look, the main thing I think I'd love to share, and particularly around this idea of empathy, is I think we need to change our focus. And what I mean by that is I have a lot of people, my business is called Empathic Consulting. I get labeled Mr. Empathy and things like that all the time. The thing I want to focus on, though, is shifting the way people think about it. So what I hear a lot of is it's a soft skill. It's a nice thing to have. It's being kind and friendly to people. And even that people say to me, oh, look, I'm really empathetic and I'm an empath and really struggling with empathy. One thing I often find is, first of all, it's not soft, it's not easy, it's very challenging. Seeing someone else's perspective is hard.
Yes.
And what I find when I talk to people in this space is when they say they're very empathetic, what they mean is they're very good at agreeing with their friends. They're good at empathizing with people like them, and they're
Yes.
very nice to those people. Now, that's good, but we don't necessarily need lots more of that. What we need is people to say, hey, I'm going to empathize with someone who's not like me.
Yep.
I need to empathize with my competitors, my frustrations. You know, if you're working in an organization, can you empathize with the complaining customer? Because if you can understand what they're going through and what's driving them, then maybe you can make their experience so much more powerful and so much more improved. Can you empathize with your enemy, with the people you don't like? And, you know, there's so many great examples through history of people who took that step back and just thought, well, hang on, let me just think about this from their seat.
Yep.
That completely transformed the way things work. You know, I think early on in my career, Danette, I was working with a very senior gentleman, and he said to me, listen, Daniel, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. And again, this is he was definitely in financial services. The sentiment behind that. Now, there's many ways we can react to that. There's many ways you can respond. I could say, well, that's not true. Yep. I could say, okay, I guess that is true. I can agree or disagree, but that's sort of irrelevant. Yeah. What's the point behind this person's message? What he's saying is, I want to make sure want to feel comfortable in the things that we're making decisions on. I need certainty. I need to feel confidence around them. And he sort of boiled this down into this statement. Now, the way I challenged that gentleman at the time was I said, do you love your wife? He said, of course I do. I said, I thought so. Do you measure it? Like, is there a chart on the fridge? Is there you got a spreadsheet somewhere? Do you give her a score at the end of the day? But if you're married, don't do that, by the way. It's a terrible
yeah, no.
But the answer is, of course not.
Yeah.
Right? But does that mean it doesn't matter? No, it actually matters more than most things. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do when we're having these sorts of conversations is not to agree, but I'm trying to understand that that person wants certainty. They want to have confidence. And I want to show them that they can have certainty and confidence that things they can't necessarily measure, and that those things are still vitally important.
Yes.
And so I agree. I want to help you with the certainty. I want to help you with doing the right things and making good decisions. And I want to open up this other space that says it doesn't mean we have to measure it.
Yep. I love
that. And so, you know, sometimes when we empathize with our friends and we build these echo chambers, we actually ostracize others.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the more in the space of empathy we can reach across that gap and really empathize with those people who are nothing like us, that's really what the world needs right now.
Yeah. I had a conversation yesterday with someone who was neurodivergent, and even just their perspective on the world and how we miss things if we're not neurodivergent. Again, that would be a great area where we could reduce the empathy gap and get more out of our people in that. So I love this conversation. We always know that our listeners and viewers are always interested in the books that we and the authors that we speak to. So, Daniel, I'd love for you to share where our listeners and viewers can reach out to you if they'd like to contact you.
Yeah, if you'd love to get in touch, I'm always on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Daniel Murray Empathic Consulting. You'll find me there. Jump on my website, so danielmurray.au. You can reach out to me there and engage me. I do a lot of speaking events. I do a lot of workshops and conferences and work with lots of leadership teams and individuals. So it's always wonderful to be able to work with people. My sort of objective is to make sure that I practice what I preach. So a big focus is, you know, let's talk about what's going on in your world, what's happening in your event, talk about the people you want me to support you with, and let's understand them really well so that we can deliver something that isn't sort of bespoke off the shelf.
Yes.
It's really something impactful. And of course, the book will come out 30th of July. So you can pre-order already on Amazon and Booktopia and all those good places, and get your copy. And we'll be doing some book launch events. So if you're interested in coming along, reach out. I'd love to connect with more of your viewers.
Thank you so much, Daniel Murray. Very excited about your book, The Empathy Gap. Can't wait to read it. And to our listeners and viewers, have a magical week.